Today we get to jump into the moments of the trial of Jesus. We saw last week where he was arrested and he was taken into custody. And today we're looking at the trial where Jesus is going to stand falsely accused. And we hope that this powerful story can influence and shape us. And through Jesus' example, we are going to learn about grace and peace in the face of injustice. And we ask, what is Jesus trying to teach me in this moment? How will I let him influence my life and my behavior? Mark chapter 14, starting at verse 53. And we will read through to the end of the chapter. They led Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes came together. And Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards and warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. And some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.' Yet even about this, their testimony did not agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, 'Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?' But he remained silent and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?' And Jesus said, 'I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' And the high priest tore his garments and said, 'What further witnesses do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?' And they all condemned him as deserving death. And some began to spit on him and to cover his face and to strike him, saying to him, 'Prophesy!' And the guards received him with blows. And as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came. And seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, 'You also were with the Nazarene Jesus.' But he denied it, saying, 'I neither know nor understand what you mean.' And he went out into the gateway, and the rooster crowed. And the servant girl saw him and began again to say to the bystanders, 'This man is one of them.' But again he denied it. And after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, 'Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean.' But he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, 'I do not know this man of whom you speak.' And immediately the rooster crowed a second time. And Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, 'Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times.' And he broke down and wept." Powerful story. We see Jesus being arrested. We see this false accusation against him. And he knows what's happening. He's been telling his disciples, "I'm going to Jerusalem to die." He knows. He's even asked the Father in his prayer time, "If there's any way that we can avoid this, let's find another path." But at the same time, not what I want, God, but what you want. So Jesus had no surprises here. He knew what was coming. It doesn't mean he wanted that to happen that way, but he knew the path that God had for him, his destiny as the Christ. He knew. And in this small passage, I want you to pick up on 3 things. The first is this: to stand firm in righteousness. You see, Jesus stood before the Sanhedrin with poise, even with the false accusations. And his unwavering attitude is an example for us about continuing to stand strong for what is right, letting the power of God support us, even when people slander us, abuse us, mistreat us. We already saw that Jesus wanted a way out, but he was willing to follow God's path, to trust in God's plan, even when people were coming against him. It reminds me of Psalm 37. You don't have to turn there. I'll read it to you. Psalm 37 says this, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your justice as the noonday." You see, he knew in the words of Isaiah the prophet, "No weapon forged against you will prevail. You will refute every tongue that accuses you." Jesus didn't feel the need to fight back, to defend himself, because he knew that God is the ultimate defender. And God promises that truth and justice will come to light. The problem, though, is that it doesn't always come to light on our time frame. When we face injustices, when we think, "God, this isn't fair. Do you see how they're mistreating me? Do you see what they are saying against me?" And we want God to come and strike a blow to vindicate us. It doesn't always happen in the time frame that we want. If you are right before God, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. No, it hurts. It's hard. I'm not going to deny that. I will be the first to admit, and my wife can verify, I am a people pleaser. I like to be liked by other people. And so oftentimes that affects my behavior, because if I know I'm going to say something that will cause someone to dislike me, maybe I'll bite my tongue. Maybe I'll not show what I really feel or really think, or do what I really want to do, because other people might think less of me. So because I want to please other people, I play this game. And Jesus says, I care more about what God says and God's justice and righteousness than to clap back and fight against these people. Which brings us right into our second point, to respond with grace and love. Jesus keeps being asked all these questions, and it says, Jesus made no answer. He remained silent. Verse 61, he remained silent. And when the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" Then Jesus answers. And this is what he says. Verse 62, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with clouds of heaven." Jesus didn't clap back. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just stood firm in who he was. That's what we've got to do, to respond with grace and with love, to trust God to pay people back and get vengeance. St. Paul writes in Romans chapter 12, "Don't take revenge, but leave room for God's wrath." It is God's place to avenge, not ours. When people say lies and evil against you, we are called to respond in love. When they're trying to tear you down, you have to do what Jesus did and hold on to who you are. Jesus didn't fight back. He held on to his identity. Like a tree in autumn. As we've gone through summer, coming into the fall now, the leaves are going to shake loose, let go of every leaf. When the strong winds come against them, they'll just let go of those leaves. And Jesus, standing tall like that tree, embraces grace and love, lets go of everything else that doesn't define him, and says, "This is who I am." He comes with that powerful "I am," which is a crazy statement for Jesus to say, "I am." And if you know the Old Testament story at all, with the story of a guy named Moses, you guys ever heard of a guy named Moses? So Moses was a hero of Israel, and one time he was out in the wilderness on this mountain, and God appeared to him in a bush, and the bush looked like it was on fire, but it wasn't burning up. So Moses goes to investigate, and it's the presence of God getting a hold of Moses. And Moses has this vision of God through this burning bush. And God says to Moses, "I need you to go back to Egypt, because we're going to rescue all of my people who are still there as slaves. I'm going to use you to bring them out." And Moses says, "Well, they're not going to believe me. If I show up and I say, your God sent me, who do I say sent me?" And God says, "Tell them, I am sent you." The divine name from the beginning has been I am, Yahweh. I am. So when they ask Jesus, "Are you the Christ?" Jesus answers with this powerful phrase that is going to set off every Jewish leader that hears him. He says, I am. He's not just saying, I am Jesus. He is saying, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God that was in the beginning, I am here now. I am. It's a loaded statement. And Jesus knows it. I'm sure he is just knowing how they are going to respond. But he doesn't waver. He holds fast to his identity, to who he is. He says, I am. And when people come against you, and in this world, guys, I will be honest, people will come against you. They will lie on you. They will mistreat you. They will abuse you. They will throw false accusations against you. You've got to let all of that go and hold on to the truth of who you are. I am loved. I am chosen. I am known by God. I am, fill in the blank, however you see your identity in God. Let go of all the other clutter that people try to throw at you and hold on to that identity. Who are you? That is what matters. So that third and final point, we trust God for the comeback. And the story shifts here. Because up till now, it has been Jesus' story. But right at the very end, we have this shift and it becomes Peter's story. Because Peter's been hanging on the outskirts the whole time. He followed Jesus. He was trying to track what was going on. And as Mark is telling the story, he shifts from Jesus' perspective to Peter's perspective. And this is, I think, one of the most powerful and saddest pieces of this story today. And I'm going to get a little bit of a Bible nerd on you here, okay? Because I'm a Bible nerd. If you still got your Bibles open to Mark chapter 14, look at chapter 14, verse 65. Everybody tracking down to verse 65? Now hold it there just for a second. Jesus had told Peter previously, before the rooster crows 2 times, you're going to deny me. Jesus already told Peter that. Back when Peter was puffing up his chest, like, no, not me. I would die for Jesus. Jesus said, no, this is what's going to happen. So now we get to verse 65. And some began to spit on him, to cover his face, and to strike him, saying to him, prophesy. They are mocking and taunting him. You've claimed to be the Son of God, then prophesy. Thinking he will never do it. And then the next verse, 66, Peter is below in the courtyard. The very prophecy that Jesus had given that they don't know is coming to pass. They say, prophesy! And right outside the door, his prophecy is happening. Oh, that gives me goosebumps. He doesn't have to defend himself. He never says, guys, if you just go outside, it's happening. He doesn't defend himself against the accusations. He trusts God's plan, knowing that God will bring justice out of injustice. And so we shift to Peter, and Peter fails. And when the rooster crows a second time, down in verse 72, Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me. And he broke down and wept. In our deepest brokenness, when we fail to the point of despair, we see Peter represents our human frailty. The one who said, I would die for Jesus, ultimately turns his back in the face of adversity. He cannot stand in the truth of righteousness. He doesn't have that identity saying, I am called, I am loved, I am chosen, I follow. He lets all that go. And for a split second, turns and hits a breaking point. And in our deepest brokenness, when we have failed God and we have failed ourselves, God offers hope, grace, and a way back. Because Peter's story doesn't end here at his failure. He goes on to lead the early church. Peter's story didn't end with his failure. And your personal failures are not the end of your story. It's how you respond to the story of Jesus and move forward that will determine your outcome. This is one of the most powerful comebacks we see. Peter breaks down weeping, recognizing his failure, not knowing how the story is going to end. We get to see it, but he doesn't know. And in your life, when you hit that point of desperate failure, and you think I am at my most broken that I can ever be, and you may not see how your story ends, I'm here to tell you that there is hope, and there is grace, and there is forgiveness. Because your story doesn't end in your brokenness. Your story continues as you continue to follow Jesus and let God work your comeback.